I set my coffee down on the kitchen counter and stood at the window for a long moment, looking out at the backyard I'd spent 3 summers turning into something worth looking at. Raised beds along the fence, a stone path I laid myself, one flagstone at a time, a covered porch with 2 rocking chairs that almost never got used because it was usually just me out there. 63 years old, and for the first time in my life, I had exactly what I wanted. Quiet. Space. A house in Asheville, North Carolina that I paid for in cash. I'm not saying that to brag. I'm saying it because 12 years ago, I was sleeping on a cot in my brother's spare bedroom with $42 in my checking account and a divorce that had taken nearly everything I'd built. I'm saying it because the road from that cot to this kitchen window was not a straight one, and there were years in the middle where I genuinely did not know if I was going to make it. My name is Frank, and what I'm about to tell you is something I've gone back and forth on sharing for a long time. But enough time has passed now that I think I can tell it straight. My daughter, I'll call her my daughter because that's what she is, even if things are complicated. Her name is Renata. She's 38. She married a man named Derek about 11 years ago, and from the very beginning, something about Derek didn't sit right with me. I couldn't put my finger on it at first. He was charming in that practiced way, the kind of charming that works in a room full of people but feels hollow up close. He shook my hand too hard at Thanksgiving. He laughed a little too loud at his own jokes. He had opinions about everything and admitted to being wrong about nothing. My late wife, Carol, God rest her, she saw it too. She whispered to me at Renata's wedding, standing by the appetizer table, "That man is going to be trouble, Frank." I told her to hush and give him a chance. I wish I'd listened to her instead. Carol passed from pancreatic cancer 7 years ago. That was the worst year of my life. Worse even than the divorce, worse than the bankruptcy. Carol had been the person who made sense of everything for me. Without her, I was unmoored in a way I'd never been before. Renata and Derek came to the funeral. They stayed 2 days, and then they were gone, back to their life in Charlotte, and I didn't hear from them much after that. I told myself they were busy. They had 2 kids by then, my grandchildren, a boy named Sam who was 9 at the time, and a girl named Lily who was 6. I missed those kids. I missed them the way you miss something that was supposed to be a big part of your life and quietly stopped being. Calls got shorter. Visits stopped. A year went by where the only contact I had with Renata was a Happy Father's Day text and a forwarded photo of the kids at Halloween. When I called to ask if something was wrong, Derek answered the phone. He told me, in a pleasant enough voice, that Renata felt like our relationship had always been difficult, that I had never really supported her choices, that they needed space to raise their family the way they saw fit. I asked to speak to my daughter directly. He said she didn't want to come to the phone. I stood in my kitchen that night, a different kitchen, a rental in Knoxville, and I tried to understand what I had done. I replayed every conversation I could remember, every holiday, every phone call, and I could not find the thing I was supposed to have done wrong. That was 9 years ago. 9 years of birthdays that came and went with nothing. 9 years of Christmases where I sat with my brother Gus and his family and tried not to think about where Sam and Lily were and whether they even knew my name anymore. I am not a man who cries easily. Carol used to say I was allergic to my own feelings, but I won't pretend those 9 years didn't hollow something out in me. Here's what I did with the hollow. I worked. I'd spent most of my career in commercial flooring. Not glamorous, I know, but I understood it. Materials, installation, contractors, timelines. After Carol died, and after Renata went silent, I started picking up every contract I could find. Worked weekends. Drove 3 states in a week sometimes. Then a general contractor in Knoxville named Phil Dobbs gave me a shot at managing a full commercial build-out for a medical office complex. 3 floors, 14 suites, deadline that would make most people sweat. I delivered it 2 weeks early. Phil told his people. His people told other people. By 2022, I had incorporated a small company, hired 4 full-time installers, and was pulling in contracts from Asheville to Atlanta. By the end of 2023, when I sold the business to a regional flooring group out of Georgia, the number on that check was more than I had earned in the entire previous decade combined. I won't say the exact figure. I'll say it was enough to buy the Asheville house outright, fund a comfortable retirement, and still have a significant amount sitting in accounts that my financial advisor, a woman named Pam over at a firm in downtown Asheville, helps me manage sensibly. I bought the house in January. By March, I had the garden going. By May, I was sleeping 8 hours a night for the first time since Carol got sick. I told almost no one about the sale. My brother Gus knew. Pam knew. A couple of old friends from the flooring industry. I am a private person by nature, and after what Renata and Derek had done, I had become even more careful about who I let close. I should have been more careful about what I posted on Facebook. My mistake, and I'll own it, was that I posted a photo of the house. Not the financial details, not anything about the sale, just a photo I was proud of, the stone path, the raised beds, the porch, a caption that said something like, "Finally home, Asheville, NC, 63, and feeling like I earned this one." I posted it on a Sunday evening. By Tuesday morning, I had a voicemail from a number I didn't recognize, a Charlotte area code. It was Renata. Her voice was different from how I remembered it, softer, a little rehearsed, I thought, though I tried not to be cynical. She said she'd been thinking about me. She said the kids were getting older and asking about their grandfather. She said she and Derek had done a lot of work on themselves, and they thought it might be time to reconnect. I listened to that voicemail 3 times. Then I called Gus. "Don't do it," he said, before I even finished explaining. "She mentioned the kids," I said. Gus was quiet for a second. "I know. But Frank, think about the timing." I thought about the timing. I called Renata back anyway. We talked for 40 minutes. She cried twice. She apologized, though the apology had a quality to it that I can only describe as dejectional. It pointed at some vague shared difficulty rather than at anything specific she or Derek had done. I noticed that. I filed it away, but I was also talking to my daughter for the first time in 9 years, and there is a part of a parent that will set aside a lot if it means the door is open again. She asked if they could visit. She said Derek was really trying, and the kids would love to see the house. I said yes. They arrived on a Friday afternoon in June. Sam was 18 now. Lily was 15. I stood at the front door and watched them get out of Derek's Jeep, and I had to grip the doorframe for a second, because the feeling that came over me was almost too large. Sam was tall, dark-haired, quiet in the way teenagers are quiet when they're not sure of a situation. Lily had Carol's eyes. That was the first thing I noticed. Carol's exact eyes, green with a little gray in them, and for a moment I couldn't speak. Renata hugged me. I hugged her back. I meant it. Derek shook my hand. Too hard, same as always. I had set up the guest room for Renata and Derek, and the room next to it for the kids. I bought groceries, planned dinners, cleared my weekend. I was trying. The first evening was genuinely fine. We sat on the porch. I grilled chicken. Sam asked me questions about the flooring business with what seemed like real curiosity. Lily showed me something she was drawing on her phone, some kind of graphic novel she was working on. I told her Carol had been an artist. Lily looked up at me when I said that, and something in her face shifted, softened. I thought, maybe this is going to be all right. I was wrong. It was Saturday morning, early, when I first heard it. I'm an early riser, always have been. Construction schedules will do that to you. I was in the kitchen at 6:15 making coffee when I heard Derek's voice from the hallway. He was on the phone, speaking low but not low enough. Not going anywhere? Renata's working on him? Yeah, it's bigger than the photo. No, he hasn't said anything about a will yet, but I'm going to find out. The kids are being good. Just have to keep them on track. I stood very still. I set my coffee mug down without making a sound and I listened. Look, just check with your guy at the bank and see what the process looks like. If he transfers anything significant before we get this sorted, we need to know. Yeah, I'll call you Monday. I heard him come back toward the kitchen. I picked up my mug and looked out the window like I hadn't moved. Derek came in, poured himself coffee, said, "Morning, Frank," like a man with a clear conscience. "Morning," I said. I called Pam that afternoon from my car while I told everyone I was making a hardware store run. Pam is not an alarmist. She's methodical, careful, the kind of person who says, let's make sure we understand the full picture before we react. So when I told her what I'd heard and she went quiet for almost 10 seconds, I knew I wasn't overreacting. "Frank," she said, "don't sign anything. Don't discuss your finances and call your attorney. My attorney is a man named Stewart who I'd used for the business sale. I reached his cell and left a message. He called back within the hour. I sat in my car in the hardware store parking lot for 45 minutes while Stewart walked me through what he'd heard, what it could mean, and what I should do. I took notes on a receipt I found in the glove box. When I drove back to the house, I was calm. That surprised me a little. I thought I'd be shaking, or furious, or heartbroken. Instead, I felt something closer to clarity. I had done this before, in a way. Carol's illness had taught me that the worst thing you can do in a crisis is fall apart before you have all the information. You stay steady. You figure out what's true. Then you act. The truth came together over the next 36 hours. Stewart had a contact, a financial investigator he'd worked with on a business dispute a few years back. That contact, doing nothing more than pulling public records, found that Derek had 2 judgments against him in Mecklenburg County. Credit card debt that had gone to collections, a personal loan from 2 years ago with a private lender that was now significantly past due. Gus called me Saturday night and told me he'd done some asking around through a friend who knew people in Charlotte. Derek had been let go from his job at a logistics company 8 months ago. Renata was working part-time at a dental office. They were 3 months behind on their mortgage. I sat with all of that for a while. Then I thought about Sam and Lily and what it meant that they were being kept on track, in Derek's words. Sunday morning, while Renata and Derek were still asleep, I sat with both kids at the kitchen table. I made them eggs. Sam ate 2 plates. Lily showed me 3 more pages of her graphic novel, which was genuinely good. The girl had real talent. I asked her about school. I asked Sam what he wanted to do after graduation. He talked about community college and then maybe transferring. And I could tell from the way he talked that he'd been thinking about this carefully but didn't have much guidance at home. I didn't say anything about what I knew. I just listened. I filed away every word. After they went back upstairs, I called Stewart and told him what I needed. Monday was the last full day of their visit. Derek came to me after lunch with a folder. Inside was a document he described as a family investment agreement, some kind of loan arrangement, where I would provide them with $250,000 to stabilize the family's financial situation and eventually be repaid from some future asset that was never clearly defined. He was smooth about it, practiced. He made it sound almost reasonable. The way a bad salesman makes a bad deal sound almost reasonable if he talks fast enough. I read through the document slowly. I asked a few questions that I already knew the answers to. Then I set it on the table and folded my hands. "Derek," I said, "how long have you been out of work?" The smile didn't disappear exactly. It reconfigured itself. I've been in a transition period. 8 months, I said, since February. The logistics company in Ballantyne. His jaw tightened. And the judgment from first premier, I said, is that the 2 years ago one or the one from before that. Renata had come into the room. She was standing in the doorway in a way that made me think she'd known this conversation was happening, that she'd been waiting somewhere nearby for the signal to come in and soften things if needed. I looked at my daughter. "Renata," I said, "I need you to sit down." She sat. "I want to be fair about what happened next, because fairness is something I believe in even when it's hard." I did not yell. I did not call them names. I told them calmly and with the documentation that Stuart had helped me prepare exactly what I knew. The judgments, the missed payments, the phone call I had overheard Saturday morning, and specifically the part where Derek told someone he needed to find out about the will. Derek tried to interrupt twice. I held up my hand. "I'm going to finish," I said. "Then you'll have a chance to say whatever you need to say." When I finished, the room was quiet. Derek said it was a misunderstanding, that I'd taken something out of context. His voice had that particular aggressive quality men use when they're embarrassed and don't know how to be embarrassed without turning it outward. Renata didn't say anything for a long moment. Then she looked at the table and said, "Dad, we're in trouble." And there it was. 9 years of silence, of a door slammed in my face. 9 years of missing birthdays and Christmases, and the first day of school for two kids I loved. And at the end of it, not "I'm sorry," not "I was wrong," just "we're in trouble." I felt the hollow again. The one I'd spent years filling up with work and early mornings and flagstones laid one at a time. I breathed through it. Here is what I did not do. I did not give them $250,000. I did not sign anything Derek had brought in that folder, which Stuart later confirmed contained language that would have made the loan nearly impossible to pursue legally if they defaulted. I did not throw them out of the house that night, because it was late and because Sam and Lily were upstairs and those kids had done nothing wrong. Here is what I did. Tuesday morning, I woke up before everyone else and I made a full breakfast. Pancakes, bacon, eggs, orange juice. When everyone came down, I sat with them at the table and I ate with them like a family. After breakfast, I asked Renata and Derek to give me a few minutes alone with Sam and Lily. I told Sam that if he was serious about the community college plan, I wanted to help. Not his parents, him directly. I told him to get the enrollment information and the tuition figures and to call me, and that I would set up a direct account for educational expenses that would be his and only his. Lily was looking at me with those green-gray eyes. I told her that Carol, her grandmother she'd never gotten enough time with, had gone to art school before she met me, that there were programs, scholarships, summer workshops for high school students with real artistic ability. I told her she had real artistic ability. I told her to look into the Painland School of Crafts, which is about an hour from Asheville and does workshops for serious young artists. Then I hugged both of those kids for a long time. Derek and Renata left by noon. Derek didn't say much at the end. He carried the bags to the Jeep and kept his face neutral the way men do when they've calculated that any other expression will cost them something. Renata stopped at the door. "I didn't know he was going to do the document thing," she said. I looked at her. My daughter, 38 years old, tired around the eyes, wearing the expression of a woman who has been making herself believe things for a long time. "Renata," I said, "I'm going to say this once and I mean it kindly and I need you to hear it. I will always be your father. That doesn't change, but I will not be managed and I will not be maneuvered, and I will not pretend that what happened this weekend or what happened 9 years ago was anything other than what it was." She nodded. I couldn't tell if it landed. "When you're ready to call me, just to call me," I said. "I'll answer," but I'm not going to chase it. She walked down the porch steps and got in the Jeep. I stood at the door until they were out of the driveway, and then I went inside and sat at the kitchen table for a while without doing anything. That was 14 months ago. In those 14 months, Sam called me twice. Once to tell me he'd enrolled in the community college, and once to tell me he'd been accepted to transfer to UNC Asheville starting in the fall. Both times I wired the tuition and fees directly to the institution. I don't need it back. I have enough, and he is my grandson, and that is the end of that calculation. Lily sent me photos of work she did at a 2-week summer workshop at Penland. One of the instructors apparently pulled her aside afterward and told her she had something real. Lily texted me about it with 3 exclamation points, and I sat with my phone for a long time in the garden, in the rocking chair, just smiling. I haven't heard from Derek. I heard from Renata once, about 6 months ago, a text that said she was sorry for how things went and that she hoped we could talk soon. I wrote back, "Whenever you're ready. No rush. I'm not going anywhere." She hasn't called yet. Some nights I sit on the porch in one of those rocking chairs and I think about Carol, about what she would say if she could see how things turned out. I think she'd be glad about Sam and Lily. I think she'd tell me I handled the Derek situation better than she expected, coming from me. I think she'd tell me to stop waiting by the phone for Renata and let myself be happy with the garden. She was usually right about things like that. Here's what I know. After 63 years and a road that went some places I wouldn't wish on anyone, you cannot pay people to love you correctly, and you cannot love people into being better than they've decided to be. You can only decide what you're willing to accept into your life, and then hold that line with kindness when you can and with firmness when you have to. The flagstones in the garden are still there. The rocking chairs are still there. The coffee I made this morning was good. It is enough. Some days, it is more than enough. And if you're sitting somewhere right now, wondering if you're worth more than how someone has been treating you, you are. You always were. The question is just whether you're ready to start acting like it. I've had a lot of time to sit with what happened, and I think the thing that took me longest to accept was this. Derek didn't create the problem. He just made it impossible to keep ignoring one that was already there. Renata made choices. Every year of those 9 years, she made a choice. She chose not to call. She chose to let her father's number sit unanswered. She chose to let her kids grow up not knowing the man who laid flagstones in his garden thinking about them. I don't say that with bitterness anymore. I say it because I spent too long looking for the thing I'd done wrong. And the truth is that when people disappear on you, it is rarely entirely about you. Sometimes it is about who they've become and who they've let themselves be shaped into, and the quiet agreements they've made with themselves to avoid the discomfort of accountability. That is not a comfortable thing to understand about your own child, but it is the truth. And I have found that the truth, even when it hurts, is a more solid thing to stand on than a comfortable story. What I know about cause and effect, not in any spiritual sense, just in the plain human sense, is that the choices we make accumulate. Derek spent years building a life on shortcuts and charm, and the assumption that someone else would eventually absorb the consequences. Those choices compounded quietly, the way debt does, until there was nowhere left to go except toward the one person he thought hadn't been paying attention. He miscalculated. I had been paying attention my whole life. I just hadn't had the occasion to show it. And Sam, that kid called me last spring just to tell me he'd made the dean's list. He didn't need anything. He just called. I sat in the garden for 20 minutes after we hung up, just sitting there with the phone in my hand. That's what it looks like when you invest in someone's actual future rather than in their parents' version of it. You don't always see it come back around, but when it does, it is worth every bit of the wait. The thing I'd tell anyone in a situation like mine, and I mean this plainly, without dressing it up, is that your integrity is the only asset that genuinely can't be taken from you. Derek could have found a way into my finances if I hadn't been paying attention. He could have maneuvered and manipulated and possibly succeeded. What he could not have done is change what I knew about myself, that I'd worked honestly, that I had rebuilt my life with my own hands, that I had not become bitter or small in the years when I had every reason to be. That is not something anyone can sign away from you or drain from an account. Moral character is not a personality trait you're born with. It is something you practice under pressure, in the moments when the easier path is available and visible and tempting. I had plenty of those moments. I chose the harder path not because I am naturally virtuous, but because I had learned slowly, expensively, that the easier part has a longer bill at the end. Lily sent me a photo last week, a piece she made at Penland, a large mixed media panel with Carol's colors in it, greens and grays, though she couldn't have known that consciously. I have it propped up against the wall in the kitchen where I can see it from the window. I look at it every morning when I make my coffee. It is enough.